Welcome back to our most exciting episode to date and episode 5 of our Wyandot Lake Park, a Planet Coaster 2 water park. Today is going to be a super exciting episode as we are going to be starting our first themed area and, of course, building our first water slide and pool. Before we get into that, though, we are going to do some basic touch up to the entry plaza. The way I envision this first themed area, and we'll get into kind of what it's going to be here in a minute, but it's going to have a big lake kind of right at the top of the screen there, and I didn't want it to look into this kind of fence area, kind of backstage area. So we're going to put in this little garden here that actually I think came out really well, looks super awesome, and that way it just kind of hides the backstage a little bit more, puts in a little bit of theming, and just really overall just looks really, really nice. So that's what we're working on here. I will say, I was going to record this episode last night, but I was traveling for most of the day, got home last night, and I had a phone call from a friend of mine informing me that one of our best friends was getting engaged, and so I ended up on the phone last night with them celebrating. So congratulations to my friend and their fiance. I know they're probably never going to watch this, but super excited for them. Cannot wait. I think they got engaged at Disney, if I'm correct. So just what a wonderful place. I know a ton of people that have gotten engaged there, and congrats to them. So this is our first water slide. It was built before the physics in the new game. We are going to turn physics on for our water slides. I kind of went back and forth on if I wanted to do that, but I really kind of want it for that kind of realism. And also, I will add, these slides are going to completely change looks. So what you're seeing here is not at all kind of the final thing. They'll kind of completely change a couple times. So here's our plan with the physics. So before we open the park, we are going to turn on the physics and essentially see if the rides work. If they do, fantastic, awesome. That's what we want. If they do not, then we are still going to open the park. But we're going to treat it as if there was a delay, a problem, some kind of issue with the development of the slides. I think in my head I already have kind of a storyline wrote out for if it doesn't work. To be honest, I'm not expecting them to work. It's the first one we've done, and we just have no idea what to expect. And so I would expect them not to work. So if you have ideas for that storyline, let me know. I have kind of a couple storyline ideas, but we'll kind of see what happens. These are also not the final colors. That kind of purple, white, and I think maybe it's a bluish color. Those will not be the final colors. We'll kind of change those as we go. And then I think I named the slide tower. It was something like Three Rivers, I think is what it was. Each slide there's 3 slides. I think it's like creek, stream, and river, or something like that. With creek obviously being kind of the most tame, river being the most intense, and then kind of stream being kind of the middle one. What we're doing here, though, is we are building the pool. This was the first pool that I built in the game, and so struggled a little bit to kind of figure it out. Eventually we do. It takes a little bit of time, though. I wanted it to be, for this area, and I'll get into kind of the name and the theme here in a second, but I wanted one giant pool. So I think that's actually a perfect time to now talk about the game. So the theme for this area is Lakeside. It's kind of, it's summer. You're taking that weekend kind of camping trip with your family or friends or whoever, and you go up to the lake. And so we're going to have kind of some big lake houses on the side. That'll be kind of where our shops and everything are. And then one massive pool. And the massive pool is going to have kind of different depths to it, which I think is something that kind of adds to it. So it'll have a diving end, it'll have a shallow zero entry end, kind of a regular swim end, and whatnot. And then you did see me just move it there. The reason I moved it there is we're going to put in this big lake right there on the kind of left side of it. That is going to be Wyandot Lake. I kind of came up with that as I was writing out the episode for this. I was like, wait a second, this kind of fits perfectly. So that's going to actually be what will be called Wyandot Lake, that the park will be named after. And so this pathway will not go all the way around. It will stop, and then we'll have the lake on the end. And I'll talk kind of more about my thoughts and how that ended up actually looking here in a little bit. But one of the things that was really kind of important to me with this is lakes are very non-symmetrical. I don't know if that's the right term for that or not. But essentially, there's not a lot of straight lines. And so it's a very kind of curvy area. So you'll see here kind of the pool's very curvy, the pathing is kind of curvy, and whatnot. And then this is something that's kind of cool that you'll see kind of throughout, but these are the entrances into the area. Only a couple. Reason being is, when you go to kind of a lake, a lot of times there's forests along the side, if there's not houses, and so that is going to kind of allow us, we'll kind of put in this kind of forest kind of feel, which will be really cool, kind of help the area kind of feel secluded. And all of our themed areas, I think, for the most part, are going to have that kind of look to it. And right here, we are going to have a little bit of a recording mistake here. I accidentally, yeah, there it is, right there. I was recording originally just using screen record on my computer, and when you finish the recording, you can either stop the recording or save the recording. If you stop the recording, it deletes the recording, and I accidentally clicked stop the recording, and so I lost all the footage of us putting it together. It's not major. It was just kind of us placing all these chairs, and then also kind of laying out the buildings. But as we kind of go through the buildings, we'll explain kind of what each of the buildings are anyway, so it's not a huge deal. Right now, so the pathing in this game, I love the new pathing system. We ended up going with this reddish brown look, and it ends up changing before it's completely done. But I wanted to kind of have a forest floor kind of vibe, kind of like a pine needle vibe, and it does change. I'm not a huge fan of what it ends up being. That won't change kind of for another episode or two, I think. But I also put in a ton of these chairs because my thought is also, you're at the lake and then you take your break. My thought also is I think the pool's capacity was like 580-ish people, and so having a chair for every person that could be there, because there's nothing worse than going to a pool and not having a place to put your stuff, a chair, something like that. So, and you'll see these chairs here. Something I did with the chairs is I kind of made different areas, right? So with Sunburn being in the game, a vast majority of the chairs are underneath covers and awnings. That being said, you might want a tan. And so we have a couple areas that are not under covers, right? Kind of where you can tan and everything. And then this area right here, we put in some cabanas. And then to the left here, we have just kind of little some more chairs there as well, which I think would be super cool if you could kind of designate actual cabanas in the game that that guests could actually like rent. If there'd be a way to do that, that'd be super cool. And then same thing with those kind of chairs there. If you could make those kind of like an adult only area, I think would be super cool. But overall, I'm really happy with how this came out. I am a little worried that we put in too many chairs, just because guests, especially when the game first came out, were not really interacting with them. After the last update, from everything I've kind of seen online, it seems like guests are interacting much more. But we will kind of see how that goes. Um, what else here? So the area. So what we're working on right now is going to be our guest service building. Again, kind of. I think it's guest services that sell sunscreen. So I think it's really important to kind of have those. I love that they sell multiple things in this game compared to the first game. So that's going to kind of be in here, and then. Obviously pool passes, which doesn't matter a ton right now, but I think will matter once we build the dry park down the road, which I mean we're a ways off from that, right? I mean we got to open the water park and make money and go through a few years of that before we do that, but eventually that'll be a little more important. I do love the gutters. I do love this building. All the buildings here you're going to notice are really, really big. This one gives a little more of like a clubhouse kind of vibe, like you'd see in kind of one of these areas, and then the rest all kind of give off like a house vibe, except for a restaurant you'll see here at the end, which gives off a little more of a restaurant vibe, which I guess makes sense. But this is gonna be our guest services, kind of our clubhouse building for the area, but all these buildings are really big, and that was done very intentionally because this area behind, there's another themed area going in behind, but in the area in between is going to be our park offices. And so all these buildings, as we kind of wrap around the back, you'll see me kind of label the doors, but all these buildings are going to hold offices for our management team and all that fun stuff. So that'll be really cool as we kind of get into it. So let's talk about the area a little bit more. So it's called Lakeside, which is there's an area in northern Ohio. I used to go to a ton growing up. It's a big kind of vacation area. It's called Lakeside, and so that's kind of where the name comes from. And so that's what we went with. But it also fits really well, especially with the big lake that is over there. Because obviously that lake is going to be called Wyandot Lake, which is the name of our park, and then all of a sudden we have Lakeside next to the lake. So it actually works out really, really well. I'm really happy with that. That kind of just popped into my head and was awesome. So it's going to have the one giant pool in the center. It's very much that kind of picnic lake with your friends and family, and we end up putting in some tables, kind of in some outskirt areas, especially around kind of where you can buy the food and drink and all that stuff. And we eventually will attach the lake. I will say, I wanted it to be an infinity pool. I thought that would be really cool, almost as if you were swimming in the lake. And that's really the vibe that I wanted to go for. Unfortunately, you cannot have natural water pushing right up to the pool, and so we ended up having to do kind of a little slope, and we can talk about that a little more in a later episode when we kind of wrap that up. But it is what it is. So back to this building here. We're going to put a little bit of a balcony on here. It's one of those things where there are things that when you build kind of over time, whether it's in Planet Coaster 1 or 2 or um, whatever, where you're like, man, I wish I could just actually make this a functional spot. And this is very much one of them. You're starting to see in parks today these kind of prestige pass zones, kind of these VIP areas. I think all the major brands nowadays have something. Um, and this just feels like it would be a really perfect area, right? You could have kind of a little air conditioned area inside, and then kind of this little outdoor area that people could hang out. Be a great like event space. Um, so I think it'd be cool if eventually we got something in the game like that. I doubt we ever will. I think it'd be a little too complicated. You can maybe link it to the whatever the fast pass in the game. I forget, priority pass. Yes, that's what it is. So you can link it to that maybe, which I think could be kind of an opportunity. But for right now, this is just gonna have to do. Um, but it's maybe a little spot for employees to kind of come and hang out and whatnot. These lights, I also think are really cool. Uh, they give off more lights than they did in the original game. With kind of those, think they were part of the fairy tale pack, maybe. But I still do wish they were maybe a little bit brighter in the game um, than they are. So is what it is, but I think this looks super great. This honestly might be my favorite building in this area. I don't know. The restaurant I think is really cool. I think the restaurant might be the favorite. And I say restaurant, it's really a QSR. I kind of touched on this in the last episode. I'm not really a fan of restaurants and water parks, just because of the health and safety aspect. Um, it can just get kind of gross at times. Um, yeah, so let's kind of talk about what's going to go into each area, and this is kind of my design philosophy uh, with the uh, with a park in general. So every park in my mind, should have themed areas. Every themed area should consist of a couple things, right? It should have a sit-down place to eat, which obviously within the water park we've already touched we're not going to have. It should have at least one retail store. And that should be like a major retail store, and then obviously your kind of smaller, your exit shops, something like that. Within an area like this, you can't really do exit shops, so it really should just have one major retail location. It should have a food location, kind of a QSR, and then a kind of quick beverage. And then we've got the bathhouse, which is what we are working on right now, which this building ends up kind of giving off mansion-y vibes. I wanted it to be a little more boathouse, but I don't think I really achieved that well, which is what it is. Not everything I build is going to be perfect, but I think that's part of the charm because it's kind of one of those things where, as we go through and we look and we say, hey, this area maybe it's time to redevelop. It's kind of maybe to make a change. It's a location where you can say, this doesn't really fit. There's something else we can do here, and so we're going to make a change to either the building itself, what's in the building. Maybe we're going to tear it down and open up behind it for something. So it is what it is. It's an area that I think is certainly going to be on the short list for renovations. But that's kind of what it is. But uh, going back to kind of my kind of design philosophy, expansion is also something that is I think about a ton. Um, I think it's easy to look at this area and say, well, it's one pool in 3 slides in one complex, and there's not really a lot to do. Well, the reality is we are building a really big park, and it's a high budget park. It is a high budget park. But at the end of the day, a budget is still limited. And so, you know, you can either build a really big park where each area, really maybe only has one slide complex, or you can build maybe a park that's half the slide or half the size, and maybe you have two slide complexes per area and maybe three in a couple. But I wanted to go with the bigger route. I wanted to be kind of a high budget, heavily themed, large park. And by not having all this complexes and a ton of stuff, kind of keeping it kind of simple, it does allow for us to have expansion, which is super important. And when I design areas, I actually sit down and I have a big sketchbook, and I will draw out and kind of sketch out the area, right? This is kind of the shape of the pool. This is where I want the slides to be. Sometimes I'll even go as far as saying, like, maybe this is the route I want the slide to take. Not normally, that's generally a little more when I do like kind of roller coasters kind of thing. But I'll do that, right? And these are the restaurants, and these are where they're going to be, and seating areas, and all that. And as part of that, I do look at and I say, okay, where are my opportunities for expansion? Number one, without removing anything. So when you look at this area, there are two or three expansion plans that I have kind of written out, and I do jot these down. So they are all kind of jotted down, and maybe someday I'll kind of share what they are down the road. But I do say, these are these two or three expansions that we could make to this area, and they are, they're going to be everything from some F&B locations, restrooms, so a new slide complex, a new pool, and then I also sit down and I say, what are two or three, and those are going to be kind of short term, within maybe the next 5 years, and then I look and I say, what are kind of some longer term plans for the area, right? Where maybe we have to remove stuff, and all that is planned out ahead of time. And then as we go through the seasons, right, and we operate the park, and year one happens, we can look and we can say, all right, this looks good. Year two, yeah, it's starting to get a little bit different. And then year three, maybe we're going, okay, this area's not as popular, this restaurant's not as popular, and then we can kind of look at the expansion plans and say, we need to make a change. We need to change this, we need to change that, we need a slide over here, we need a pool over here, whatever. And we can kind of incorporate all of those in, and in some cases there's even overlapping. So there's a site I know within this area, and it's been a while since I built it, so I don't remember exactly what our plans are because I haven't looked at it in a while. But there is, I know, one area over here that I look at as kind of the 1A site for expansion. But I think it's a slide complex. That's kind of my first choice, is a slide complex. But at the same time, I've also got plans for a drink stand and a food stand, because a slide complex might not be what this area needs, right? The F&B locations could be completely overrun, or the slides, the slide complex that we built that we'll finish another time is just super not popular, but not over popular, and we don't need another slide, or financially maybe it doesn't make sense. And so we've got a kind of a number of different options and paths that we could take there. But we are starting to run out of time here on this episode, so tomorrow we are going to continue work on Lakeside, with wrapping up our buildings. I'm really happy with how they all turned out for the most part, so make sure to tune in for that. I'll also spend some time in the next episode kind of talking about what my thoughts are in the game, the updates that have been released, and some things that maybe I'd like to still see come to the game. I think I had a much longer list when the game first came out. Frontier's done a fantastic job, but there are still definitely some things that I want to see kind of put in. So as always, please make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you enjoyed the video or enjoying the series so far, or kind of critiques, kind of changes you'd make based on what you'd see, things you'd like to see us build as we go on. I play this game a bunch, so my thought is I might as well record it and throw it up here. And if it's being enjoyed, then great. If not, then oh well, no harm, no foul. I lose kind of an hour of my day recording these, so whatever. So if you are enjoying it though, it'd be great to know. So just make sure you like, subscribe, kind of comment your thoughts. It does kind of go a long way in saying, hey, you should kind of keep doing this. But for now, that's all I've got. So enjoy the rest of your day in the last couple seconds here, and we will see you tomorrow in episode 6.